afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast Addendum, covering another topic there from the balance poll. And today, the topic we're looking at is sort of one of the other topics gotten a lot of attention, which is, the Wehrmacht infantry does not scale well into the late game. And I'd contend that's not quite the case. I mean, Wehrmacht infantry tends to scale pretty well. I mean, they get a lot of bonus, they can be pretty potent. The problem is, Allied basic infantry, for the most part, for example, scales even better. I mean, veteran infantry, riflemen, veteran to infantry section, for example, there already get what amounts to, constant light cover bonus, which tends to mean, get pretty bulletproof, don't have to use cover nearly as much, if at all, and that, tends to, scale the tactical play of the game. And obviously just give them a pretty huge advantage when they don't have to use cover. Their opponent does have to. I mean, that gives them a lot more freedom of movement, which, gets a bit awkward. So that's sort of more what I contend is part of the issue. But also another one, I'd say, it's not so much the infantry, it's the entire faction itself that does not scale well into the late game. I mean, the power levels tend to drop heavily with Tier 3 and Tier 4 especially. I mean, you get the Panzer IV, one of the most expensive medium tanks in the game, but tends to underperform compared to, Shermans and not the T-34, but the Cromwell tank. In fact, the Cromwell outperforms the Panzer IV for the most part at a lower price point, so does the Sherman. Again, can do a lot more. And that's sort of where things get a bit funny, right? And then with the Austrian as well, doesn't perform that well, say, compared to the Centaur. Again, despite, being roughly the same price point. You got the Stug in theory, but it still lacks a bit of something there, I would say, a bit versus infantry. Again, that's all the thing. I mean, again, with the way Allied infantry scales and overall performance, again, you just need everything needs to push a bit of anti-infantry. Even, stuff like the Stug. And of course, get to the Panther, which is just so expensive to get to, and then it, just doesn't quite have the splash, the impact. In part because, again, the Allied, medium anti-tank stuff. I'm not talking like the specific heavy tank stuff like the Jackson, the Issue-5, but stuff like just, regular anti-tank guns, even the Issue-6 there, can reasonably reliably penetrate the frontal armor, which again, is a bit odd when you have stuff that can be acquired by Tier 2 in most cases, can reliably penetrate, a very expensive to get Tier 4 unit from the front. It sort of creates a bit of a sort of an awkward momentum and sort of places the Wehrmacht in an awkward spot, in particular because they overall still struggle to clear anti-tank guns as well. And that's sort of the other thing, again, in terms of just not scaling. They struggle a lot there to sort of do serious damage compared to how vulnerable they are. In that sense, again, we sort of get to a bit the issue there with the Wehrmacht, which, well, again, they brought a lot of the design from companies one. They brought away some of the stuff that didn't work, like, purchasable veterancy, medic bunkers. I mean, that don't really makes sense. I mean, for those people who want, them to have boastful squads like the Brits, I mean, the problem is that'd be just like that, purchasable veterancy. It'd just be more way, not to get back into the game, but just establish dominance once you get there. And that's not what the Wehrmacht needs. I mean, if the Wehrmacht's got ahead, great, they can reasonably hold well, but the problem is, in one thing can throw them completely off compared to the Allies, where they can struggle a lot more. And there's not really any way for the Wehrmacht to get into a game they've sort of been struggling, except, well, for the moment, the Stug. And again, the Stug is not exactly popular because of this cheesy, spammable unit, which obviously makes it, kind of rubbish. They have to rely on that if they want, a half-decent chance of getting back in the game. But at the same time, the Stug is one of the few units that can sort of reliably kill and punish Allied infantry for the Wehrmacht. And that's sort of one thing the Wehrmacht sort of lacks to an extent, something that can reliably kill Allied infantry of the armoured kind, later into the game, because the Austrian doesn't really fulfill that role. The Panzer IV is sort of because, again, it's, at a pricier point. The Sturmpanzer requires excessive amounts of micromanagement for it to work. The Panzerwerfer is like, it might do it. And the Panthers, again, lacking something there compared to the Comet, which, again, is easy to get, roughly the same price point, but just outperforms the Panther in most departments. So, I mean, there's, again, I would contend the issue is not that Wehrmacht infantry doesn't scale well into the late game. It's just the faction itself does not scale because, A, the Allies can basically counter most of the stuff there, and there's no real increase in power for the Wehrmacht then to make up for the fact that most of the stuff is, to an extent, easily countered. Again, it creates, these problems here for the Wehrmacht, and again, where they have to put in more effort and have to just continually keep it up. And if they struggle and fall behind, there's no really way for them to sort of catch up and really get back there, except for relying on a few sort of very cheesy units. Because in terms of tech, again, it doesn't really scale there. Again, when you hit Tier 4, there's not an extra gap there. There's no Knights Cross holders anymore, which again, for some reason, were removed. When again they removed everything else, again, that's something that needs to be there, because again, without the other sort of things, pin them under. Again, they need, even better infantry, somewhere late game, again, if they sort of have to make, Tier 2, 3, and 4 work. And again, that's sort of what's not quite working there in part. So again, I would contend it's not that late infantry doesn't scale into the late game, it's the faction itself does not scale very well into the late game, which gives a problem to catch up if the Allies sort of get an upper hand, which is not that difficult. And again, really only have the option of mech and assault with the Stugi, sort of, have a chance of getting back into the game, and that way, turn things around away. And the Stugi does it perhaps too well, and obviously it needs to be nerfed, but nerfed once they sort of get around to fixing the Wehrmacht's later tiers to have a bit more punch, which again is all the problem when you compare with everything else. Again, hopefully it sort of gets the point across there. Again, I don't think they necessarily need to buff more of the veterans of the units there. They just need to, add, I think, another elite infantry unit for the Wehrmacht, or they need to somehow add in some abilities to sort of improve the units there with sort of maybe unlock with make more tech, for example, Panzer Grenadiers, get some kind of handy-dandy, assault ability, just, gives them a bit better chance there. But again, they also need to just look into the Allied infantry basics, especially, not getting so much received accuracy veteran. It really is one of the really bad things they did there for just the balance. It's just giving them so much, basically ability to ignore cover, which again is really, really bad, and just I think poisonous to an extent there for the game. I mean, they pretty much removed as much as they could from the Wehrmacht, so why the Allies get it, strikes me as a bit peculiar. Because again, that's why one of the problems with the Volksguard was such a problem. They could just ignore cover. So why the riflemen, infantry sections get away with it is, of course, a bit peculiar. And again, that's one of the things that need to be looked into. But again, otherwise, they need to look into, adjusting the power levels of tier 3 and tier 4 more. And again, I think they need to look into just adding in a better unit than the Pentagon is a tier 4, because again, one of the issues, and if you lose a unit and you then have to replace it again, you're going to struggle up against a lot more tougher units in the sense, again, who can ignore cover, who can get a lot more firepower, and they can more easily get back into the game compared to your Panzer Gunners and Grenadiers. You have to keep getting them fresh later into the game, because again, they're still small and they can still easily get damaged a lot, but they can't quite get in the same impact as they could early in the game, which is, again, the sort of problem. Again, the faction itself does not scale very well into the late game. I mean, I don't know if Relic watches it, but again, I would very much sort of, again, argue that's the case. I mean, veteran 3 Panzer will do well, and they would do really well reasonably if, they just fix, again, Rifle Veteran 3, for example, again, being, nigh bulletproof, again, they, be able to sort of more properly outperform them. But again, that's not the case. In fact, Rifle Veteran 3 with BARs, for example, can actually easily hold off Panzer Grenadiers Veteran 3, despite, again, it takes a lot more effort to get the Panzer Grenadiers to Veteran 3, to actually, do all of that pretty neat stuff. And infantry, whilst they're close, you sort of got, they could sort of pull off the same arena, sort of getting back. It's the stormtroopers from entirely different doctrines, thanks to their tactical advance. But again, if you then give that to the Panzer Grenadiers, they need to give something new to the stormtroopers to make them stand out. Otherwise, you just pretty much rendered stormtroopers completely obsolete, because they're themselves also at a pretty awkward price point. A bit like the Panther, but still overall, I'd argue the stormtroopers do have a bit more, punch than the Panther in that sense. But still, they are one of the other units there that's sort of at an awkward price point, and they don't, could do with being a bit cheaper in that department, or something else changing. So, yeah, it's a bit of a rant here, but overall, again, so just, want to try and emphasize again, I don't think, they need to buff Grenadier and Panzer Grenadier veterancy as such. I think they need to look into British infantry section veterancy, Rifle veterancy, and they need to look into tier 3 and tier 4 for the Wehrmacht. Again, less infantry scaling, more the entire faction scaling. Again, I think that's where the Wehrmacht runs off. So, there you go. Hopefully this has been an educational topic. Hopefully, this is interesting. Hopefully bring some food for thought, and hopefully, somewhere someone from Relic watches this, maybe, takes it into account when they do their stuff there for the upcoming patch, whenever that is. So, there you go. Hopefully, again, you enjoyed it, learned something from it. If you did, subscribe, like, share, and comment on it. This is Imperial Lane signing off, and see you all another time. Cheers.